The lost generation, also known as the generation of 1914 in Europe, is a term originating from Gertrude Stein to describe those who fought in World War I. The lost generation is defined as the cohort, born from 1883 to 1900, who came of age during the World War I and the Roaring Twenties. Worldwide, about 20 million people died in World War I, or the Great War as it was known at the time, and another 20 million or so were wounded. Those born in the last 2 decades of the 1800s were heavily impacted. Young people served in the military in large numbers and figured highly in those casualties. Many who survived the war emerged with deep physical or emotional wounds. Young adults lost friends and often saw their careers and family plans disrupted. In war-torn regions, family homes and livelihoods were sometimes destroyed. The term lost generation first appeared in the epigraph of Ernest Hemingway's book, Fiesta. The Sun Also Rises in 1926. Gertrude Stein, an American modernist author, brought this term to light. The greatest generation, also known as the GI generation and the World War II generation, is the Western demographic cohort following the lost generation and preceding the silent generation. The generation is generally defined as people born from 1901 to 1927. They were shaped by the Great Depression and were the primary generation composing the enlisted forces in World War II. Most people of the greatest generation are the parents of the silent generation and baby boomers, and in turn, were the children of the lost generation. An early usage of the term the greatest generation was in 1953 by U.S. Army General James Van Fleet, who had recently retired after his service in World War II and leading the 8th Army in the Korean War. He spoke to Congress, saying, "The men of the 8th Army are a magnificent lot, and I have always said the greatest generation of Americans we have ever produced." As of 2023, approximately 119,550, under 1%, of the 16 million Americans who served in World War II remain alive. Living members of this generation are either in their 90s or are centenarians. The silent generation, also known as the traditionalist generation, is the Western demographic cohort following the greatest generation and preceding the baby boomers. The generation is generally defined as people born from 1928 to 1945. By this definition and U.S. Census data, there were 23 million silents in the United States as of 2019. In the United States, the Great Depression of the 1930s and World War II in the early to mid-1940s caused people to have fewer children, and as a result, the generation is comparatively small. It includes most of those who fought during the Korean War. Upon coming of age in the post-war era, silents were sometimes characterized as trending towards conformity and traditionalism, as well as comprising the silent majority. However, they have also been noted as forming the leadership of the civil rights movement and the 1960s counterculture and creating the rock and roll music of the 1950s and 1960s. Baby boomers, often shortened to boomers, are the demographic cohort following the silent generation and preceding Generation X. The generation is often defined as people born from 1946 to 1964 during the mid-20th century baby boom. In the West, boomers' childhoods in the 1950s and 1960s had significant reforms in education, both as part of the ideological confrontation that was the Cold War and as a continuation of the interwar period. Theirs was a time of economic prosperity and rapid technological progress. In the 1960s and 1970s, as this relatively large number of young people entered their teens and young adulthood, the oldest turned 18 in 1964. They, and those around them, created a very specific rhetoric around their cohort, and the social movements brought about by their size and numbers, such as the counterculture of the 1960s and its backlash. The term baby boom refers to a noticeable increase in the birth rate. Generation X, often shortened to Gen X, is the demographic cohort following the baby boomers and preceding millennials. Researchers and popular media often use the mid-1960s as its starting birth years and the late 1970s as its ending birth years, with the generation being generally defined as people born from 1965 to 1980. By this definition and U.S. Census data, there are 65.2 million Gen Xers in the United States as of 2019. As children in the 1970s and 1980s, a time of shifting societal values, Gen Xers were sometimes called the latchkey generation, which stems from their returning as children from school to an empty home and needing to use a key to let themselves in. This was a result of what is now called free-range parenting, plus increasing divorce rates, and increased maternal participation in the workforce prior to widespread availability of childcare options outside the home. Millennials, also known as Generation Y, often shortened to Gen Y, are the demographic cohort following Generation X and preceding Generation Z. Researchers and popular media use the early 1980s as starting birth years and the mid-1990s to early 2000s as ending birth years, with the generation typically being defined as people born from 1981 to 1996. As the first generation to grow up with the internet, millennials have also been described as the first global generation. The generation is generally marked by elevated usage of and familiarity with the internet, mobile devices, and social media. The term digital natives, which is now also applied to successive generations, was originally coined to describe this generation. Millennials have also been called the unluckiest generation because the average millennial has experienced slower economic growth since entering the workforce than any other generation in U.S. history. The generation has also been weighed down by student debt and childcare costs. Generation Z, often shortened to Gen Z, colloquially known as Zoomers, is the demographic cohort succeeding millennials and preceding Generation Alpha. Researchers and popular media use the mid to late 1990s as starting birth years and the early 2010s as ending birth years. Most members of Generation Z are the children of Generation X or older millennials. As the first social generation to have grown up with access to the internet and portable digital technology from a young age, members of Generation Z, even if not necessarily digitally literate, have been dubbed digital natives. Moreover, the negative effects of screen time are most pronounced in adolescence as compared to younger children. Compared to previous generations, members of Generation Z tend to live more slowly than their predecessors when they were their age, have lower rates of teenage pregnancies, and consume alcohol, but not necessarily other psychoactive drugs, less often. Generation Z teenagers are more concerned than older generations with academic performance and job prospects, and are better at delaying gratification than their counterparts from the 1960s, despite concerns to the contrary. Sexting among adolescents has grown in prevalence. The consequences of this remain poorly understood. Additionally, youth subcultures have been quieter, though they have not disappeared. Nostalgia is a major theme of youth culture in the 2010s and 2020s. Generation Alpha, often shortened to Gen Alpha, is the demographic cohort succeeding Generation Z. Researchers and popular media use the early 2010s as starting birth years and the mid to late 2020s as ending birth years. Named after Alpha, the first letter in the Greek alphabet, Generation Alpha is the first to be born entirely in the 21st century and the third millennium. Members of Generation Alpha are usually the children of millennials and some of older members of Generation Z. Generation Alpha has been born at a time of falling fertility rates across much of the world and experienced the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic as young children. For those with access, children's entertainment has been increasingly dominated by electronic technology, social networks, and streaming services, with interest in traditional television concurrently falling. Changes in the use of technology in classrooms and other aspects of life have had a significant effect on how this generation has experienced early learning compared to previous generations. Studies have suggested that health problems related to screen time, allergies, and obesity became increasingly prevalent in the late 2010s. Giyot. The slang giyot is often used as a synonym of the exclamation "goddamn" to mean surprise or shock. The popularization of the slang giyot as a synonym of goddamn and its association with large butts is often credited to Twitch streamer YourAge. The giyot slang spread to other social media platforms, where it was similarly used as a positive exclamation to react to attractive women. Mewing, a technique in which the tongue is placed on the roof of the mouth, is purported to make the jaw more square, improve sleep, and reduce mouth breathing. Some even claim that mewing can treat speech disorders, jaw pain, and sinusitis. The how to mew technique has received a lot of attention on social media. However, oral and maxillofacial surgery experts warn there's little evidence to support claims that it can actually change your jaw structure and appearance or improve your health. The main purported benefit of mewing is the enhancement of facial appearance. Phantom tax. Phantom tax is an internet slang term describing the theft of food between friends. The first usage of phantom tax referred exclusively to streamer Phantom, who jokingly taxed snacks by taking bites of food from fellow content creators during streams on the broadcasting platform Twitch. In an interview with Wired, Phantom defined the term as, "Let's say your friend having a meal, he's having a good meal, and you just want a piece of that meal. Like, you know what I'm saying? You need a share. That's your friend and the friend's share, right? Get you a little piece of the meal. It's the phantom tax. You just go ahead and just like, let me get a little bit of 5%, 10% of the meal, maybe 20%. Misinformation. Misinformation is a major source of brain rot nowadays. In the fitness and wellness industry in particular, there are many influencers who pose as experts without the required training or credentials. These people may spread dangerous or harmful advice about improving fitness or losing weight, endangering the health of those who follow them. Extreme examples of people sharing dangerous or completely incorrect information include the video that suggested drinking borax, a cleansing chemical, to aid in digestion. This is a clear example of dangerous misinformation. Of course, following such advice can have serious consequences for people's health. Grimace Shake. In June 2023, McDonald's announced the release by changing their profile picture on social media platforms TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram to a picture of Grimace looking at the Grimace Shake. A TikTok video trend with the hashtag Grimace Shake began circulating after the release of the shake. In the video, users recorded themselves wishing Grimace a happy birthday while drinking the shake. The video then cuts to a scene of the users finding themselves in unusual positions and in strange locations, or being discovered dead while covered in the drink. The videos are staged to look like a crime scene with the shake splattered around, implying that Grimace is the assassin who is responsible for their transformation. TikTok user Austin Fraser was considered to have created the first instance of this trend. Riz. Riz is an internet slang word defined as style, charm, or attractiveness. It originated as an abbreviation of the word charisma. The phrase was made popular outside the African American community by American YouTuber and Twitch streamer Kai Cenat in mid-2021, though it was used colloquially long before. It subsequently garnered virality on the social media application TikTok. Oxford University Press named it its word of the year for 2023. Cenat would share to people how to have Riz and developed other phrases, such as W-Riz and L-Riz, to describe a person's winning or losing abilities at attracting or chatting up a potential love interest. The word is mainly used by Generation Z. Skibidi Toilet. Skibidi Toilet is a machinima web series of YouTube videos and shorts created by Alexei Gerasimov. Produced using Source Filmmaker, the series follows a fictional war between human-headed toilets and humanoid characters with electronic devices for heads. Skibidi Toilet's audience is predominantly among Generation Alpha, born after the early 2010s. While the series does not appear in YouTube Kids, an app designed for children under the age of 13, it still enjoys popularity among elementary students. Skibidi Toilet has sparked its audience to create and post fanworks, such as games, fan fiction, and art. As of November 2023, YouTube videos associated with Skibidi Toilet accumulated over 65 billion views, while on the social media platform TikTok, the Skibidi Toilet hashtag is trending and comprises 15.3 billion views. By December 2022, the channel Da Fook Boom had amassed 37 million subscribers, experiencing such rapid growth that on occasion had surpassed those of Mr. Beast, the second most subscribed channel of YouTube. Social media. A computer program operates in the background while users browse social media, evaluating each interaction to build a comprehensive profile of each user's interests and characteristics. This profile is then used to influence what users see online, affecting their opinions and purchasing decisions. As long as people are aware that this algorithm exists and may therefore approach internet material with greater suspicion, there is nothing intrinsically wrong with this. It's evident that social media networks are getting better at drawing users' attention, achieving this through the clever use of content known to be irresistibly engaging, from relaxing ASMR videos to captivating Call of Duty gameplay, from pimple popping to food preparation. These are just some examples of what we can define as satisfying videos. The reason why these videos work so well in maintaining attention is because they tap into the emotions of each individual. After the data analysis we just discussed, and the more time spent online, the more data platforms collect, further fueling the algorithms that shape what is seen and how it is seen. Sigma. With its associations with independence, self-reliance, and non-conformity, the Sigma male phenomenon has gained a lot of traction. It provides a counterbalance to the traditional masculinity hierarchy that places alpha, beta, and omega male archetypes at the top. The sigma male is often referred to as the lone wolf of the digital age because he goes after his own path, doesn't follow the herd, and does things his own way. Video gaming. While it's possible to game without getting addicted, some gamers play compulsively and develop gaming disorder. They become so entranced by video games' alternate worlds, fanciful characters, and complicated plots that they can have difficulty functioning in other areas of life. ASMR, an autonomous sensory meridian response, is a tingling sensation that usually begins on the scalp and moves down the back of the neck and upper spine. A pleasant form of paresthesia, it has been compared with auditory tactile synesthesia and may overlap with frisson. ASMR is a subjective experience of low-grade euphoria, characterized by a combination of positive feelings and a distinct static-like tingling sensation on the skin. It is most commonly triggered by specific auditory or visual stimuli and less commonly by intentional attention control, only in Ohio. The meme's origins may be traced back to a user's 2016 Tumblr post titled Ohio versus the World. Although the caption of the photo definitely linked to the bus stop, the post itself inspired a number of memes and trends. With the widespread distribution of these memes and Ohio's current population, it would appear as though 99% of the world's population lives there. This is obviously untrue and serves as a stark example of the difficulty in reconciling perception with reality. These days, people create absurd images or scenarios that ironically imply that strange or bizarre events only happen in Ohio. Mukbang. A mukbang, also known as an eating show, is an online audiovisual broadcast in which a host consumes various quantities of food while interacting with the audience. The genre became popular in South Korea in the early 2010s and has become a global trend since the mid-2010s. Varieties of foods ranging from pizza to noodles are consumed in front of a camera. The purpose of mukbang is also sometimes educational, introducing viewers to regional specialties or gourmet spots. Looksmaxing. Looksmaxing is the process of maximizing one's physical attractiveness. While the practice as a whole can refer to simple hygiene, more extreme methods have become associated with looksmaxing, such as mewing. The practice is affiliated with incel subculture and originated on manosphere message boards such as lookism, sluth hate, and PUA hate. The practice became a TikTok trend and became popular amongst mostly teenagers in the 2020s, with origins tracing back to mid-2014.
Minimization and maximization. Minimization and maximization are two different but similar interrogation techniques. They have the same premise. Minimization means the crime is made to look smaller than it truly is. The suspect is fooled into believing the offense really is innocuous and confesses. This works by making the suspect believe his punishment will be smaller than he thought. Maximization is the opposite. This means the crime is made to look bigger than it is. The interrogator will often remind the suspect of long jail terms and the most severe punishments applicable to the offense. This works by making the suspect believe he will receive a lighter punishment if he confesses. Both techniques are considered controversial because they could lead to harsher punishments for the suspect. During an experiment, it was discovered that a mock jury was more likely to convict people who confessed after interrogators used the minimization technique to coerce a confession. Peace. Peace means preparation and planning, engage and explain, account, closure, and evaluate. It is an interrogation technique mostly used by police officers in the UK and New Zealand. The idea is to make the interrogation look more like an interview than a regular interrogation. It involves lots of talking. The interrogators ask lots of questions and make the suspect talk for as long as possible. They become friendly with the suspects while carefully coercing them to confess. The interrogator also asks the suspect to recall everything he remembers about the incident. Then they compare whatever the suspect says with what they already know. They also zero on interesting details from the suspect's statements and ask more questions. Cognitive interview. Crime victims and eyewitnesses sometimes have a hard time recalling information about a crime. At other times, they even give entirely wrong information that they think is true. Police prevent this by engaging in cognitive interviews. Instead of asking a victim what happened straight up, they could make them recall other things that happened at the time of the incident. Questions asked during cognitive interviews could be as innocuous as just asking about the weather. Interviewees are often asked to reveal everything they remember, down to the smallest and most useless details. One common tactic is to ask the victim or eyewitness what they heard or saw during the incident. Victims and eyewitnesses could also be asked what they were doing on the day of the crime. Another common tactic is to ask the interviewee to recall the incident from the end to the beginning. People normally recall events from the beginning to the end. An eyewitness could also be asked what they thought other witnesses or the criminals saw during the crime. Lies. The police are allowed to lie to you, and they often do. Police tell all sort of lies to coerce suspects to confess. They could claim they have fingerprints, DNA evidence, or eyewitnesses who saw the suspect commit the crime, even when they do not. One of the most coercive lies involves assuring the suspect that whatever they say will not be used against them in court. Another involves the false revelation that an accomplice already confessed and implicated the suspect. Then they offer to help the suspect if he confesses. Police could also tell the suspect that a lie will put him in more trouble or other people in trouble. They can also give fake tests and lie about test results. Some suspects are made to take fake lie detector tests and given fake results that will usually show they failed. During tense interrogations, police could offer to switch the recorder in the interrogation room off in an attempt to coerce the suspect into making an unrecorded confession. While they might truly have stopped recording, they probably haven't. Besides, interrogation rooms often have several cameras on them, so switching one off is no assurance that the rest are off. Police could also trick a suspect into giving them DNA samples without asking. They do this by offering the suspect a can of soda, a cup of coffee, or water. They later extract DNA from the saliva at the tip of the cup or can. Kinesic interview. Kinesic interview is an observational interrogation technique. The interrogating officer asks the suspect several questions while closely observing their behavior and body language as they respond. Officers also try to detect nervousness, deception, and lies. The officer compares the suspect's actions to certain behaviors they call confession behaviors. These are behaviors people are thought to exhibit when they're guilty. They include crying, slumping into the chair, and pointing a thumb up when the hands are clasped. Field interview. Police do not always need to make arrests before they interrogate a suspect. They could also conduct informal interrogations they call field interviews. A field interview is an interrogation conducted outside a police station. These interviews are not structured and are at the discretion of the interviewing officer. The simple conversation you had with that cop during a traffic stop is a field interview. Don't slip up during those conversations, though, because whatever you say could be used against you in court. The police officer is not required to tell you that because Miranda rights are only read when you are arrested. The rule of the thumb is to consider any question a cop asks you besides your name and home address a field interview. Plainclothes officers can also conduct field interviews but need to identify themselves first. Leading and loaded questions. Interrogators ask lots of questions during interrogations. One category of these is called leading questions. These are questions that force the suspect to give specific answers. Interrogators choose their words carefully when asking leading questions. For instance, an interrogator could ask, "Did you see the man in the black and white overalls?" The use of "the" instead of "a" has made the question a leading question. The suspect could have just said he didn't see any man wearing black and white overalls if an "a" was used. But a "the" means the man in black and white overalls was there. Now the suspect has to think about the incident. The thing is, though, that the police could ask this sort of question even if a man wearing black and white overalls was never at the scene. A similar tactic involves the use of loaded questions. Loading questions assume that certain facts are true, even if they are not. For instance, an interrogator could ask, "At what time last night did you drive away in the getaway car?" Or, "What were the two of you arguing about that ended in you hitting him?" The first question implies that the suspect was in the getaway car. The other question accuses the suspect of hitting another person, even if he never did. There are also dichotomous questions that require yes or no answers and multiple-choice questions that give the suspect more possible answers but still limit the responses to a certain number of choices. Read technique. The read technique is one of the primary interrogation techniques used by the police. The technique is long, complicated, and involves several strategies. The interrogation starts with the officer telling the suspect that the evidence points to his guilt. However, he takes care to not actually blame the suspect for the crime. The officer engages the suspect in a one-sided conversation. The suspect is not given permission to talk during the conversation because he will always deny the accusation, especially when he is guilty, and it could be difficult to get the truth thereafter. The suspect talks anyway and tries hard to prove his innocence. The interrogator is sympathetic toward the suspect during the conversation. He reinforces the suspect about his supposed innocence and will even remind him that the crime could have been committed by somebody else. While at it, the officer closely observes the suspect for behaviors that indicates he could be lying. The read technique has been criticized because it is usually long, coercive, and confrontational. The interrogating officer also tells a lot of lies. This has caused innocent people to admit to crimes they never committed. Several police departments are abandoning it for this reason. Good cop, bad cop. The good cop, bad cop interrogation technique is the carrot and stick of police interrogation. It was originally part of the read technique but is used as a standalone tactic these days. Like the name already hints, one cop pretends to be the bad guy, while the other is the good guy. The bad cop interrogates the suspect first. He is brash, uncouth, and very arrogant. He intimidates the suspect, insists he is guilty, and urges him to confess. Some suspects become afraid at this point and confess. The good cop comes in when the suspect does not confess. He chides the bad cop for his aggressive interrogation tactics and takes over the interrogation. He assures the suspect of receiving a lighter punishment or even a pardon if they confess to the crime. The goal is that the suspect will become calmer and be more likely to confess to the nicer cop. Mr. Big. Mr. Big is also called the Canadian technique because it was developed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the 1990s. The tactic is time-consuming and only used as a last resort for uncooperative suspects the police know are guilty. The police find where the uncooperative suspect hangs out. An undercover officer befriends the suspect and, after several visits, asks if the suspect is interested in some jobs from the officer's organization. The suspect, who is usually a person of shady character, says yes. The jobs start off as smaller tasks, like recovering vehicles from people owing the organization, but soon involve burglaries and other crimes. During that time, the undercover officer will converse with the suspect until the latter reveals details of the crime being investigated. The undercover officer introduces the suspect to the boss of the organization several months later. The boss, of course, is another undercover officer. The first undercover officer revisits the details of the crime he had earlier gleaned from the suspect and coerces the suspect to confess to the boss. The suspect will usually refuse to talk, but the boss will insist on knowing the details of the crime because he wants to know everything about his new man and does not want surprises. The boss sends the suspect away if he still refuses to talk and does not give him more work. The undercover officer contacts the suspect again weeks later. The suspect is desperate at this time and wants more work, so he becomes cooperative and reveals the details of the crime to the undercover officer. He repeats the confession to the boss, after which he is arrested. Pokémon. At the forefront of the anime universe stands Pokémon, an absolute titan in both the industry and the realm of multimedia franchises. With its imaginative world of superpowered creatures, Pokémon has become a cultural juggernaut, boasting a staggering net worth that exceeds $100 billion. While the anime series, movies, and video games contribute significantly to its revenue, it's the licensed merchandise that truly drives its success, outperforming all other avenues combined. Hello Kitty. Although Hello Kitty may seem more like a merchandising mascot than an anime character, its extensive line of products has propelled it into the realm of highest-grossing anime franchises. With estimated earnings ranging between $80 to $84.5 billion, Hello Kitty's simplistic charm has captured the hearts of diverse demographics, making it a staple in pop culture worldwide. Anpanman. Anpanman may not be as well known outside of Japan, but it's a beloved children's anime with a massive impact on its native audience. Centered around a superhero made of a traditional Japanese sweet, Anpanman's revenue primarily stems from retail sales and ticket admissions to the Yokohama Anpanman Children's Museum, showcasing its enduring popularity among young viewers. Mobile Suit Gundam. With its sprawling sci-fi world and iconic humanoid robots, Mobile Suit Gundam has solidified its status as a cornerstone of the mecha anime subgenre. While the anime adaptations have garnered praise, it's the model kits, known as Gunplas, that have been the primary source of revenue, demonstrating the franchise's ability to adapt and resonate with audiences across generations. Dragon Ball. The adventures of Son Goku and his comrades in Dragon Ball have captivated audiences for decades, earning the franchise a spot among the highest-grossing anime of all time. With its signature blend of action-packed sequences and vibrant characters, Dragon Ball's success is fueled by a myriad of sources, including video games, merchandise, and blockbuster movies. Fist of the North Star. Set in a post-apocalyptic world, Fist of the North Star stands as a testament to the enduring appeal of martial arts-themed anime. While its sporadic releases continue to attract fans, it's the revenue generated from pachinko machines that underscore the franchise's lasting legacy and financial success. One Piece. As one of the longest-running anime series, One Piece has navigated its way into the hearts of viewers with its epic tale of pirates and adventure. Boasting over 1,000 episodes and a dedicated fan base, the franchise's revenue is bolstered by merchandise and video game sales, signaling its enduring popularity as it approaches its final arc. Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has revolutionized the anime landscape with its innovative integration of a card game narrative. While the anime serves as a platform for promoting the titular card game, it's the staggering sales of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that have propelled the franchise into the realm of highest-grossing anime. Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon emerged as a cultural icon for the shoujo demographic, spearheading the magical girl subgenre within anime. With its empowering narrative and captivating characters, Sailor Moon's revenue is driven by merchandise sales, showcasing its enduring influence on pop culture. Evangelion. Neon Genesis Evangelion transcends the boundaries of traditional mecha anime with its dark, cerebral narrative and exploration of psychological themes. While its impact on the genre is undeniable, the franchise's revenue is diversified through home media, box office sales, and pachinko machines, solidifying its status as a mecha masterpiece.
The Flying Spaghetti Monster is the deity of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, or Pastafarianism, a parodic new religious movement that promotes a light-hearted view of religion. It originated in opposition to the teaching of intelligent design in public schools in the United States. According to adherents, Pastafarianism, a portmanteau of pasta and Rastafarianism, is a real, legitimate religion as much as any other. It has received some limited recognition as such. The flying spaghetti monster was first described in a satirical open letter written by Bobby Henderson in 2005 to protest the Kansas State Board of Education decision to permit teaching intelligent design as an alternative to evolution in state school science classes. In the letter, Henderson demanded equal time in science classrooms for flying spaghetti monsterism, alongside intelligent design and evolution. After Henderson published the letter on his website, the flying spaghetti monster rapidly became an internet phenomenon and a symbol of opposition to the teaching of intelligent design in state schools. Christianity. Christianity is the largest world religion by number of followers, around 2.4 billion. Members of the religion are called Christians. Christians generally believe Jesus Christ to be the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity. It is an Abrahamic monotheistic religion, meaning it has only one God and believes him to be the same deity who spoke to Abraham. It has its roots in Judaism. It is based on the life and teachings of Jesus. To most of the people of his time, Jesus was a preacher, teacher, healer, and prophet from ancient Judea. However, his disciples believed him to be much more than that. They believed that Jesus was God's one and only Son, who was sent down to earth to die on a cross for their sins. The man said to be his father, Joseph, was a carpenter. Jesus was executed by being nailed to a cross or crucified under Pontius Pilate, the local Roman governor at the time. His life and followers are written about in the New Testament, part of the Bible. The word Islam means submission to the will of God. Followers of Islam are called Muslims. Muslims are monotheistic and worship one, all-knowing God, who in Arabic is known as Allah. Followers of Islam aim to live a life of complete submission to Allah. They believe that nothing can happen without Allah's permission, but humans have free will. Islam teaches that Allah's word was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. Muslims believe several prophets were sent to teach Allah's law. They respect some of the same prophets as Jews and Christians, including Abraham, Moses, Noah, and Jesus. Muslims contend that Muhammad was the final prophet. Mosques are places where Muslims worship. The Quran, or Quran, is the major holy text of Islam. The Hadith is another important book. Muslims also revere some material found in the Judeo-Christian Bible. Followers worship Allah by praying and reciting the Quran. They believe there will be a day of judgment and life after death. A central idea in Islam is jihad, which means struggle. Hinduism embraces many religious ideas. For this reason, it's sometimes referred to as a way of life or a family of religions, as opposed to a single, organized religion. Most forms of Hinduism are henotheistic, which means they worship a single deity, known as Brahman, but still recognize other gods and goddesses. Followers believe there are multiple paths to reaching their god. Hindus believe in the doctrines of samsara, the continuous cycle of life, death, and reincarnation, and karma, the universal law of cause and effect. One of the key thoughts of Hinduism is Atman, or the belief in soul. This philosophy holds that living creatures have a soul, and they're all part of the Supreme Soul. The goal is to achieve moksha, or salvation, which ends the cycle of rebirths to become part of the Absolute Soul. Followers of Buddhism don't acknowledge a supreme god or deity. They instead focus on achieving enlightenment, a state of inner peace and wisdom. When followers reach this spiritual echelon, they're said to have experienced nirvana. The religion's founder, Buddha, is considered an extraordinary being, but not a god. The word Buddha means enlightened. The path to enlightenment is attained by utilizing morality, meditation, and wisdom. Buddhists often meditate because they believe it helps awaken truth. There are many philosophies and interpretations within Buddhism, making it a tolerant and evolving religion. Buddhism encourages its people to avoid self-indulgence, but also self-denial. Buddha's most important teachings, known as the Four Noble Truths, are essential to understanding the religion. Buddhists embrace the concepts of karma, the law of cause and effect, and reincarnation, the continuous cycle of rebirth. Followers of Buddhism can worship in temples or in their own homes. Buddhist monks, or bhikkhus, follow a strict code of conduct, which includes celibacy. Judaism is one of the world's oldest religions, dating back nearly 4,000 years, and is considered to be the original Abrahamic faith, which include Islam and Christianity. As a monotheistic faith, followers of Judaism believe in one God who revealed himself through ancient prophets, including Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Solomon, and others. In addition to a number of sacred texts, the most important of which is the Torah, Jews believe that the Ten Commandments are holy laws handed down to Moses by God. Worldwide, there are about 14 million Jews today who worship in religious centers known as synagogues. Throughout their history, Jews have been subject to persecution for their faith, including the deaths of about 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. The Baha'i faith is a religion founded in the 19th century that teaches the essential worth of all religions and the unity of all people. Established by Baha'u'llah, it initially developed in Iran and parts of the Middle East, where it has faced ongoing persecution since its inception. The religion is estimated to have 5 to 8 million adherents, known as Baha'is, spread throughout most of the world's countries and territories. The Baha'i faith has 3 central figures: the Babe, executed for heresy, who taught that a prophet similar to Jesus and Muhammad would soon appear; Baha'u'llah, who claimed to be that prophet in 1863 and had to endure both exile and imprisonment; and his son, Abdul Baha, who made teaching trips to Europe and the United States after his release from confinement in 1908. After Abdul Baha's death in 1921, the leadership of the religion fell to his grandson, Shoghi Effendi. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religious movement characterized by a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Unitarian Universalists assert no creed, but instead are unified by their shared search for spiritual growth. Unitarian Universalists do not have an official, unified corpus of sacred texts, but rather draw inspiration and guidance from the 6 sources: personal experience, prophetic utterances, world religions, Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings, and spiritual teachings. Unitarian Universalist congregations include many atheists, agnostics, deists, and theists. There are churches, fellowships, congregations, and societies around the world. The roots of Unitarian Universalism can be traced back to Protestantism and liberal Christianity. Superman complex. In psychology, a Superman complex is an unhealthy sense of responsibility, or the belief that everyone else lacks the capacity to successfully perform one or more tasks. Such a person may feel a constant need to save others, and in the process, takes on more work on their own. God complex. A God complex is an unshakable belief characterized by consistently inflated feelings of personal ability, privilege, or infallibility. The person is also highly dogmatic in their views, meaning the person speaks of their personal opinions as though they were unquestionably correct. Someone with a God complex may exhibit no regard for the conventions and demands of society and may request special consideration or privileges. Superior complex. A superiority complex is a defense mechanism that develops over time to help a person cope with feelings of inferiority. The term was coined by Alfred Adler in the early 1900s as part of his school of individual psychology. Individuals with a superiority complex typically come across as supercilious, haughty, and disdainful toward others. They may treat others in an imperious, overbearing, and even aggressive manner. Adonis complex. Muscle dysmorphia is a subtype of the obsessive mental disorder body dysmorphic disorder, but is often also grouped with eating disorders. In muscle dysmorphia, which is sometimes called bigorexia, megorexia, or reverse anorexia, the delusional or exaggerated belief is that one's own body is too small, too skinny, insufficiently muscular, or insufficiently lean, although in most cases, the individual's build is normal, or even exceptionally large and muscular already. Persecution. A persecutory delusion is a type of delusional condition in which the affected person believes that harm is going to occur to oneself by a persecutor, despite a clear lack of evidence. The person may believe that they are being targeted by an individual or a group of people. Persecution delusions are very diverse in terms of content and vary from the possible, although improbable, to the completely bizarre. The delusion can be found in various disorders, being more usual in psychotic disorders. Electrocomplex. In Neo-Freudian psychology, The Electra complex, as proposed by Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung in his theory of psychoanalysis, is a girl's psychosexual competition with her mother for possession of her father. In the course of her psychosexual development, the complex is the girl's phallic stage. A boy's analogous experience is the Oedipus complex. The Electra complex occurs in the third, phallic stage, ages 3-6, of 5 psychosexual development stages: the oral, the anal, the phallic, the latent, and the genital, in which the source of libido pleasure is in a different erogenous zone of the infant's body. Don Juan complex. Don Juan syndrome is a non-clinical term for the desire, in a man, to have sex with many different female partners. The name derives from the Don Juan of opera and fiction. The term satyriasis is sometimes used as a synonym for Don Juanism. The term has also been referred to as the male equivalent of nymphomania in women. These terms no longer apply with any accuracy as psychological or legal categories of psychological disorder. Father complex. Father complex in psychology is a complex, a group of unconscious associations or strong unconscious impulses, which specifically pertains to the image or archetype of the father. These impulses may be either positive, admiring and seeking out older father figures, or negative, distrusting or fearful. Savior complex. In psychology, a savior complex is an attitude and demeanor in which a person believes they are responsible for assisting other people. A person with a savior complex will often experience empathic episodes and commit to impulsive decisions, such as volunteering, donating, or advocating for a cause. A person with the complex will usually make an attempt to assist or continue to assist, even if they are not helpful or are detrimental to the situation, others, or themselves. Phaeton complex. The Phaeton complex is a psychological condition described by Maurice Choisy as a painful combination of thoughts and emotions caused by the absence, loss, coldness, or traumatizing behavior of one or both parents, resulting in frustration and aggression. Phaedra complex. The Phaedra complex is an informal, non-scientific designation to the sexual desire of a stepmother for her stepson, though the term has been extended to cover difficult relationships between stepparents and stepchildren in general. Peter Pan complex. Peter Pan syndrome is the popular psychology concept of an adult who is socially immature. The category is an informal one invoked by lay people and some psychology professionals in popular psychology. Ophelia complex. Ophelia complex is the term used by Gaston Bachelard to refer to the links between femininity, liquids, and drowning, which he saw as symbolized in the fate of Shakespeare's Ophelia. Oedipus complex. In classical psychoanalytic theory, the Oedipus complex refers to a son's sexual attitude towards his mother and concomitant hostility toward his father, first formed during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. Napoleon complex. The Napoleon complex, also known as Napoleon syndrome and short man syndrome, is a purported condition normally attributed to people of short stature, with overly aggressive or domineering social behavior. It implies that such behavior is to compensate for the subject's physical or social shortcomings. Messiah complex. The Messiah complex is a mental state in which a person believes they are a Messiah or prophet and will save or redeem people in a religious endeavor. The term can also refer to a state of mind in which an individual believes that they are responsible for saving or assisting others. Medusa complex. Medusa complex is a psychological complex revolving around the petrification or freezing of human emotion and drawing on the classical myth of the Medusa. The term Medusa complex was coined in 1948 by Gaston Bachelard to cover the feeling of petrification induced by the threat of the parental gaze. Martyr complex. In psychology, a person who has a martyr complex, sometimes associated with the term victim complex, desires the feeling of being a martyr for their own sake and seeks out suffering or persecution because it either feeds a physical need or a desire to avoid responsibility. In some cases, this results from the belief that the martyr has been singled out for persecution because of exceptional ability or integrity. Madonna whore complex. In psychoanalytic literature, a Madonna whore complex, also called a Madonna mistress complex, is the inability to maintain sexual arousal within a committed and loving relationship. First identified by Sigmund Freud, who called it psychic impotence, it is a psychological complex that is said to develop in men who see women as either saintly Madonnas or debased whores. Men with this complex desire a sexual partner who has been degraded, whore, while they cannot desire the respected partner, Madonna. Laius complex. The Laius complex revolves around the paternal wish for filicide, particularly for the extinction of the male heir, in an attempt to ensure one will have no successors. Jonah complex. The Jonah complex is the fear of success, or the fear of being one's best. This fear prevents self-actualization, or the realization of one's own potential. It is the fear of one's own greatness, the evasion of one's destiny, or the avoidance of exercising one's talents. Inferiority complex. In psychology, inferiority complex is a consistent feeling of inadequacy, often resulting in the belief that one is in some way deficient or inferior to others. Icarus complex. The Icarus complex is a term in psychoanalysis and personality theory first used by Henry A. Murray to describe a particular type of overambitious character. Psychosynthesis has applied it to those in whom spiritual ambition exceeds their personality limits, leading to a backlash. Hero complex. Hero complex is a psychological disorder that causes a person to seek recognition for heroism. Cinderella complex. The Cinderella complex was first described by Colette Dowling, who wrote a book on women's fear of independence, an unconscious desire to be taken care of by someone else. The complex is said to become more apparent as a person grows older. Barbershop paradox. In a town, it's customary for the barber to shave people who don't shave themselves. However, who shaves the barber? If he shaves, it's against the rule. If not, he should be shaved in accordance with the rule. Simpson's paradox illustrates how findings gained from individual subgroups may not always align with the overall result. It happens when a trend emerges in distinct data groups, but vanishes or reverses when the groups are combined. Liar paradox. Suppose someone claims to be lying. If the person is telling the truth, then the person is lying, meaning that the person was only lying about lying. Value paradox. While non-essentials like diamonds are more expensive, essentials like water are less expensive despite their necessity. The raven paradox states that discovering a black raven proves your point that all ravens are black, but it also argues that finding anything that is neither black nor raven, such a green apple, proves your point. An endlessly large hotel with an infinite number of rooms is the Grand Hotel paradox. The hotel has an endless number of rooms, so even if every room is taken, they can still accept more visitors. For example, to make room for you, they could theoretically shift the guest from room 1 to room 2. This would require moving every guest from their current room to a new room. According to the Stockdale paradox, having faith that you will succeed eventually raises your chances of success, while having faith that you will succeed quickly diminishes those chances. Grandfather paradox. You might be able to avoid your own birth if you use a time machine to stop your grandparents from meeting, but how could you have used the time machine in the first place if you were never born? Needing something you can only have if you don't need it is known as the catch-22 paradox. For instance, a pilot who is insane can avoid risky flights, but requesting not to fly indicates that he is sane. Temperature paradox. If the temperature is 90 and the temperature is 90 rising? Opposite day paradox. If I say that it's opposite day, is it? The paradox of Pinocchio. Logical conundrum arises if Pinocchio claims that his nose will grow. In the event that it is true, he is lying. In the event that it is untrue, he is telling the truth. After all, his nose should expand. Lottery paradox. It is acceptable to think that a specific lottery ticket is not the winning ticket if there is only one winning ticket in a huge lottery, yet it is not rational to think that no lottery ticket will win. Olber's paradox. Why is the sky dark if there are a vast number of stars in the universe? According to Jevons' paradox, technological advancements that boost resource efficiency typically result in higher resource usage overall because consumers find the product more appealing. Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, a fast runner, gives a tortoise a head start in a race. The paradox says Achilles will never pass the tortoise because every time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little. It keeps going like this, forever making it seem like Achilles can't catch up. Preparedness paradox. Because of the reduced damage resulting from preparedness for a disaster and mitigation of its effects, the perception of the disaster would be significantly less severe. Interesting number paradox. The first number that can be considered dull rather than interesting becomes interesting because of that fact. Ship of Theseus. It seems like one can replace any component of a ship, and it is still the same ship. So they can replace them all, one at a time, and it is still the same ship. However, they can then take all the original pieces and assemble them into a ship. That, too, is the same ship they began with. Friendship paradox. On average, your friends tend to have more friends than you do. This happens because people who are social and have more friends are more likely to be your friends' friends. According to Schrodinger's cat, a particle in quantum theory can exist in several states concurrently when it is not noticed. This state is known as superposition. When the particle is observed, however, the superposition condition collapses, and it happens to be in precisely one of those states at random. In a hypothetical scenario, we could place a machine in a box that releases poison only when a particle is in a certain state. We could also place a cat inside the box, and until the poison was released, the machine would simultaneously release the poison and not release the poison. This would mean that the cat would remain both alive and dead until the poison was observed. Obviously, this would only work if neither the machine nor the cat are thought of as observers. Twin paradox as stated by Einstein. If your identical twin became an astronaut and traveled on a spaceship that traveled at the speed of light, you would have been a few years older than him when he returned. This is because time travels more slowly in space. Unexpected hanging paradox. The condemned prisoner is informed that he will be hanged on a weekday next week, but as the week goes on, the execution will surprise him. He reasons that Friday is the latest possible day for the hanging because it would still be surprising on Thursday, but if it hasn't happened by Thursday night, Friday is no longer surprising, so he concludes it must occur on Thursday, yet that would also be expected. So writes paradox, you have a heap of sand. If you remove one grain at a time, when does it stop being a heap? Fermi paradox, if the universe is infinite, why haven't we seen any aliens? Tolerance paradox. Unlimited tolerance can make tolerance disappear as it allows too much intolerance for a tolerant society to survive. It must not tolerate intolerance. Bootstrap paradox. Who is the original author of a book on relativity if a time traveler gives it to a young Einstein and he publishes it as his own? Abilene paradox. People can make decisions based not on what they actually want to do, but on what they think that other people want to do, with the result that everybody decides to do something that nobody really wants to do, but only what they thought that everybody else wanted to do. Paradox of thrift. Saving more money individually is generally a good thing, but it can lead to economic problems for everyone, as it could cause reduced consumption and economic growth. Crocodile paradox. A crocodile steals a child and promises its return if the parent correctly predicts what the crocodile will do. If the parent says the child won't be returned, and the crocodile agrees, a paradox arises if the crocodile returns the child. It contradicts its promise if it doesn't return the child. It also contradicts the agreement. Sword and shield paradox. What happens when a sword sharp enough to cut any shield meets a shield strong enough to block any blade? Birthday paradox. 366 persons would be required to have a 100% chance of at least 2 members of a group sharing the same birthday. 23 people would be required to have a 50% chance. 2 envelope paradox. You are given 2 indistinguishable envelopes, each of which contains a positive sum of money. One envelope contains twice as much as the other. You may pick one envelope and keep whatever amount it contains. You pick one envelope at random, but before you open it, you are given the chance to take the other envelope instead. Ironic process theory. Ironic processing is the psychological process whereby an individual's deliberate attempts to suppress or avoid certain thoughts renders those thoughts more persistent. Cantor's paradox. The set of all sets would have its own power set as a subset. Therefore, its cardinality would be at least as great as that of its power set. But Cantor's theorem proves that power sets are strictly greater than the sets they are constructed from. Consequently, the set of all sets would contain a subset greater than itself. Hedonism paradox. The more directly one seeks pleasure or happiness, the less likely they are to achieve it. The moving rows. Suppose 2 rows are moving past a stationary row in opposite directions. If a member of a moving row moves past a member of the stationary row in an indivisible instant of time, they move past 2 members of the row that is moving in the other direction in this instant of time. Thank you for watching and subscribe. Alabama. The land that is today the state of Alabama was originally settled by 2 groups of Native Americans, the Cherokee and the Muskogee peoples. The first European to arrive in the area was Spanish explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pineda in 1519. Alabama became the 22nd state on December 14, 1819. Alaska. The land that is today the state of Alaska was originally settled thousands of years ago. Historians believe that the people first arrived from northern Asia, coming across the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age. The United States purchased Alaska from Russia on August 1, 1867 for $7,200,000. Arizona. Prior to Europeans arriving, Arizona was settled by a number of Native American tribes, including the Hopi, Pueblo, Zuni, Apache, Mojave, and Navajo. The Navajo lived in dome-shaped homes called hogans and became famous for their woven blankets. The first European to arrive in Arizona was Spanish priest Marcos de Niza in 1539. In 1863, President Lincoln signed a bill making the western half of the New Mexico Territory a separate territory named Arizona. On February 14, 1912, Arizona was admitted as a state. It was the 48th state and the last of the 48 contiguous states to be admitted. Arkansas, the land that is today the state of Arkansas, was first settled thousands of years ago by people called the Bluff Dwellers. The first European to arrive in Arkansas was Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto in 1541. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson and the United States purchased a large region of land from France called the Louisiana Purchase. For $15 million, the U.S. acquired all the land west of the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. The land of Arkansas was included in this purchase. California. California has been inhabited for thousands of years. When Europeans first arrived, there were a number of Native American tribes in the area, including the Chumash, Mojave, Yuma, Pomo, and Maidu. These tribes spoke a number of different languages. A Spanish ship captained by Portuguese explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo was the first to visit California in 1542. In 1846, the United States and Mexico went to war in the Mexican-American War. When the war ended in 1848, California became a territory of the United States. 2 years later, on September 9, 1850, California was admitted into the Union as the 31st state. Colorado. People have lived in Colorado for thousands of years. One of the early civilizations was the basket makers who lived in the southwestern area of Colorado. The first European to visit Colorado was Spanish explorer Francisco de Coronado in 1541. On November 7, 1876, Colorado was admitted to the United States as the 38th state. Connecticut. Before Europeans arrived in Connecticut, the land was inhabited by Native American tribes. The first European to visit Connecticut was Dutch explorer Adrian Block in 1614. Connecticut ratified the new U.S. Constitution on January 9, 1788, and became the fifth state to join the United States. Delaware. Before the Europeans arrived, there were two main Native American tribes that lived in the area: the Lenni Lenape, also called the Delaware, and the Nanticoke. In 1609, Henry Hudson explored the Delaware Bay while trying to find a passageway to China. On December 7, 1787, Delaware became the first state and has since been known by the nickname the First State. Florida. People have inhabited the land of Florida for thousands of years. The first European to visit Florida was Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who arrived in 1513. On March 3, 1845, Florida became the 27th state. Georgia. The two major tribes were the Cherokee and the Creek. The first European to explore Georgia was Hernando de Soto in 1540. Georgia joined and signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. After the war, Georgia joined the newly formed Republic of States and became the fourth state of the United States. Hawaii. The first people to arrive at the Hawaiian Islands were the Polynesians. They traveled to Hawaii by canoe around 500 AD. The first recorded visit to Hawaii by a European was by British explorer Captain James Cook in 1778. On August 21, 1959, Hawaii was admitted to the Union as the 50th state. Idaho. When the Europeans arrived, there were two major Native American tribes in the region: the Nez Perce in the north and the Shoshone to the south. In 1805, explorers Lewis and Clark entered Idaho on their way to the Pacific Ocean. On July 3, 1890, that Idaho joined the Union as the 43rd state. Illinois. Some of the ancient cultures that lived in the area included the Paleo-Indians, the Woodland people, and the Mississippian culture. In 1673, French explorers Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet were the first Europeans to arrive in Illinois. On December 3, 1818, Illinois was admitted to Union as the 21st state. Indiana. The Woodland culture inhabited the area until 1000 AD when the Mississippian culture emerged. The first European to explore Indiana was French explorer Robert de La Salle in 1679. The legislature petitioned the U.S. Congress to become a state in 1815, and Indiana was accepted as the 19th state on December 11, 1816. Iowa. The earliest people are called the Paleo-Indians. The first Europeans arrived in Iowa in 1673 while exploring the Mississippi River. On December 28, 1846, Iowa was admitted to the Union as the 29th state. Kansas. Early inhabitants are called the Paleo-Indians. The first European to arrive in Kansas was Spanish explorer Francisco de Coronado in 1541. On January 29, 1861, Kansas joined the Union as the 34th state. Kentucky. One of the earliest cultures to develop here was the Woodland peoples, including the Hopewell and the Adena. In 1750, explorer Dr. Thomas Walker discovered a pass through the mountains. He called it the Cumberland Gap. On June 1, 1792, Kentucky became the 15th state. Louisiana. Early cultures include the woodland people and the Mississippian culture. The first Europeans to arrive in Louisiana were Spanish explorers. First came Pánfilo de Narváez in 1528, and then Hernando de Soto in 1543. On April 30, 1812, Louisiana was admitted as the 18th state. Maine. Early civilizations include the Red Paint people and the Susquehanna. The first European to visit the area may have been Viking explorer Leif Erikson. On March 15, 1820, they got their wish and became the 23rd state of the United States. Maryland. Some of the larger Native American tribes in Maryland were the Nanticoke, the Delaware, and Piscataway. Early European explorers such as Giovanni da Verrazzano in 1524 and John Smith in 1608 sailed along Maryland's coastline. Maryland ratified the new United States Constitution and was the 7th state to join the Union on April 28, 1788. Massachusetts. Native American tribes spoke the Algonquian language and included the Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Nauset, Nipmuc, and Mohican peoples. Early explorers visited the coast of Massachusetts, including John Cabot in 1497. Massachusetts became the 6th state to join the United States on February 6, 1788. Michigan. Ancient cultures such as the Hopewell peoples built large mounds that were likely the burial sites of their leaders. The first Europeans to arrive in Michigan were the French. On January 26, 1837, Michigan was admitted to the Union as the 26th state. Minnesota. The largest Native American tribe in the area was the Dakota Sioux. French explorers such as Pierre Radisson and Medard de Groseilliers first visited the region in the 1650s. On May 11, 1858, Minnesota was admitted to the Union as the 32nd state. Mississippi. The land that is today the state of Mississippi was once the home to ancient cultures such as the Mound Builders and the Mississippian culture. The first European to visit Mississippi was Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto in 1540. On December 10, 1817, the U.S. Congress made Mississippi the 20th state. Missouri. One of the most prominent early cultures was the Mississippian culture. In 1673, French explorers Father Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet entered Missouri traveling along the Missouri River. On August 10, 1821, Missouri was admitted as the 24th state. Montana. Archaeologists call the first people that lived there the Paleo-Indians. The first Europeans to venture into Montana were French fur traders in the 1700s. On November 8, 1889, Montana was admitted as the 41st state. Nebraska. In the west were the nomadic tribes of the Cheyenne and the Lakota Sioux peoples. The first European to arrive in Nebraska was likely Spanish explorer Francisco de Coronado in 1541. On March 1, 1867, Nebraska was admitted to the Union as the 37th state. Nevada. Before the arrival of Europeans, the land of Nevada was inhabited by Native American tribes, including the Shoshone, the Paiute, the Washoe, and the Mojave. The first European to arrive in the area was Spanish friar Francisco Garces in the 1700s. On October 31, 1864, Nevada was admitted as the 36th state. New Hampshire. When the Europeans arrived in the 1600s, the Algonquian peoples lived in the region, including the Abenaki and Pennacook tribes. One of the first Europeans to visit the region was English explorer Martin Pring in 1603. On June 21, 1788, it became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution. New Jersey. Prior to Europeans arriving, the Lenni Lenape Native Americans lived in New Jersey. The first European to explore New Jersey was Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano, who explored the coastline in 1524. New Jersey ratified the new Constitution on December 18, 1787, and became the 3rd state to join the Union. New Mexico. Ancient cultures such as the Mogollon people and the Anasazi were the ancestors of Native American tribes, such as the Pueblo. In 1540, Spanish conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado arrived with a large group of soldiers. New Mexico was admitted to the U.S. as the 47th state on January 6, 1912. New York. There were 2 major groups of Native Americans, the Iroquois and the Algonquian peoples. In 1609, English explorer Henry Hudson found New York Bay and the Hudson River while exploring for the Dutch. On July 26, 1788, New York ratified the new U.S. Constitution and became the 11th state to join the Union. North Carolina. The land was inhabited by Native American tribes, including the Cherokee, the Catawba, the Tuscarora, and the Croatan. First, explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano mapped out the coastline in 1524. On November 21, 1789, North Carolina ratified the Constitution and joined the United States as the 12th state. North Dakota. Before the arrival of Europeans, there were several Native American tribes in the region. These tribes included the Mandan, Arikara, and Hidatsa. France laid claim to the land in 1682, when Robert de La Salle claimed much of the land west of the Mississippi for France. On November 2, 1889, North Dakota was admitted to the Union. Ohio. Early cultures were the mound-building cultures, such as the Hopewell and the Adena peoples. The first European to arrive in Ohio was French explorer Robert de La Salle in 1669. In 1803, Ohio was admitted into the Union as the 17th state. Oklahoma. Native American tribes included the Ute, Comanche, Osage, Quapaw, Wichita, and the Caddo. The first European to arrive in Oklahoma was Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado in 1541. Oklahoma became the 46th state on November 6, 1907. Oregon. Some of the major tribes included the Nez Perce, the Chinook, the Klamath, the Paiute, the Molalla, and the Cayuse. In the 1500s, European explorers such as Sir Francis Drake spotted the coastline of Oregon, but did not set foot on land. On February 14, 1859, Oregon was admitted into the Union as the 33rd state. Pennsylvania. Tribes included the Shawnee in the southwest, the Susquehannock in the south, the Delaware in the southeast, and the Iroquois in the north. English explorer Captain John Smith sailed up the Susquehanna River and met with some of the Native Americans in the area in 1608. On December 12, 1787, Pennsylvania ratified the Constitution and became the second state to join the Union. Rhode Island. The largest of the tribes was the Narragansett. Other tribes included the Wampanoag, the Niantic, the Nipmuc, and the Pequot. The first recorded visit by a European was in 1524, when Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano arrived. Rhode Island became the 13th state to join the Union on May 29, 1790. South Carolina. The two largest tribes were the Catawba and the Cherokee. The first European to arrive in South Carolina was Spanish explorer Francisco Gordillo in 1521. After the Revolutionary War, South Carolina became the 8th state to join the United States on May 23, 1788. South Dakota. The three main tribes of the Sioux were the Lakota, the Eastern Dakota, and the Western Dakota. The French explorers François and Louis-Joseph de La Vérendrye were the first Europeans to arrive in South Dakota in 1743. On November 2, 1889, the territory was split in half, and both North and South Dakota were admitted as the 39th and 40th states. Tennessee. Before the Europeans arrived in Tennessee, the land was settled by the Cherokee and Chickasaw Native American tribes. The first European to arrive in Tennessee was Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto in 1541. On June 1, 1796, Congress made Tennessee the 16th state of the United States. Texas. The Caddos lived in East Texas and were excellent farmers growing corn and sunflowers. The Karankawa people lived along the Gulf Coast of Texas. In 1519, the Spanish arrived in Texas when Alonso Alvarez de Pineda mapped the coastline. On December 29, 1845, Texas was admitted as the 28th state. Utah. One of the largest tribes was the Ute people, from which Utah gets its name. The Ute lived in temporary homes called tepees and hunted buffalo for food. The first Europeans didn't arrive in Utah until the 1700s, when Spanish explorer Juan Antonio de Rivera visited in 1765. On January 4, 1896, Utah was admitted as the 45th state. Vermont. Prior to the Europeans arriving, the land was inhabited by the Abenaki people. In 1609, French explorer Samuel de Champlain arrived in Vermont and claimed the land for France. In 1791, Vermont joined the United States as the 14th state. Virginia. Before Europeans arrived in Virginia, the land was inhabited by Native American tribes, including the Catawba in the south, the Powhatan in the east, the Cherokee in the west, and the Tutelo in the center region of the state. In 1606, the Virginia Company of London was granted a charter to start a colony in Virginia. After the war, Virginia voted to ratify the U.S. Constitution and became the 10th state on June 25, 1788. Washington. Along the coast, tribes such as the Chinook, Maca, Lummi, and Nooksack thrived. In 1775, Spanish explorer Captain Bruno Hexeda landed on the coast of Washington and claimed the land for Spain. On November 11, 1889, Washington was admitted into the Union as the 42nd state. West Virginia. Early cultures include the Paleo-Indians, the Adena, and the Hopewell peoples. West Virginia was originally part of the Virginia colony, established by England in 1606. On June 20, 1863, West Virginia became the 35th state. Wisconsin. Native American tribes included the Ottawa, Ojibwe, Kickapoo, Huron, Sioux, and the Ho-Chunk. The first European to arrive in the region was French explorer Jean Nicolet in 1634. It joined the Union as the 30th state on May 29, 1848. Wyoming. Some of the major tribes were the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, Ute, and Shoshone. The first white man to enter Wyoming was explorer John Coulter in 1807. On July 10, 1890, Wyoming became the 44th state.
Conservatism. As the name implies, conservatism seeks to preserve traditional values in Western society. Conservatives typically support organized religion, the nuclear family, the military, and private property rights. Liberalism. Liberal ideologies are typically recognized as having dominated modern history. They typically support free markets and believe that each and every person has the right to pursue their own interests, as well as the requirements that the government be accepted by the people who live in the country. Elections involving several political parties, the division of responsibilities among the several levels of government, the exemption of religion from state authority, and a list of core principles outlined in the Constitution, including the right to privacy, press freedom, assembly freedom, speech freedom, and religious freedom. Anarchy. Anarchism is an ideology that supports a society devoid of rulers and established authority, emphasizing the concept of freedom. It proposes stateless communities and voluntary free groups to take the place of states. Capitalism. The fundamental features of capitalism include private property, free exchange, competition, division of labor, and social collaboration. Capitalism is an economic system founded on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Communism. The core of communism is shared ownership of the means of production, exchange, and distribution, which distributes goods to every member of society according to need. Private property, social classes, money, or the state do not exist in society. Corporatism. The term corporatism refers to a political system that is not dominated by large business interests. Instead, it refers to the organization of society in various industries, such as agriculture, military, engineering, and so on, to which people are assigned based on their interests and skills. It also believes in a cross-class system of regulation in which the state, employers, and workers negotiate with one another to run the economy as efficiently as possible and satisfy all parties involved. Imperialism. In addition to believing that a nation should increase its power or influence through military action, imperialism was once very popular and essentially significant as conservatism. However, its popularity has declined over time. Imperialism is known for its support of war and its belief that the stronger nations should rule over the weaker ones. It typically refutes accusations of oppression by arguing that colonized people benefit because the richer nations support them and provide them with resources they wouldn't otherwise have. Feminism. Feminism seeks to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. It is based on the belief that women are unfairly treated in society and that men should have the upper hand. Efforts to modify this view include dismantling gender stereotypes and enhancing the opportunities available to women in the workplace and in school. Fascism. Fascism asserts that people are weakly divided but powerfully united under the banner of a state, nation, army, or other similar organization. It is authoritarian, meaning that it is typified by a ruling class that rejects the notion that voters can choose between different political parties and is characterized by a strong central authority, typically a dictator, which means it opposes the division of powers. Fascism is also ultranationalist, meaning it upholds the idea that a country should prioritize its own interests over the rights of other nations. Typically, militarism, the belief that a country should have a strong enough military to advance its interests and ideals, coexists with ultranationalism. Fascism uses brutal measures to stifle resistance. Nazism. Nazism is a type of fascism that places a strong emphasis on its racist ideology, which holds that the Aryan race is superior and that it should rule the rest of the world to improve it. This makes Nazism ultranationalist. To be classified as an Aryan by the Nazis, one must be white, straight, mentally and physically capable, free of cowardice, and not Jewish. If one is deemed non-Aryan, one is referred to as Untermensch, which means subhuman. Eugenics is a set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of the human population. As a result, people with inherited disorders are deemed useless eaters and are either killed or sent to camps. Libertarianism. Libertarianism maintains liberty as a fundamental ideal and works to promote individual freedom and political autonomy. It supports very minimal government and adheres to liberal ideas such as equality before the law and the fundamental rights to life, liberty, and property. Moderatism. The political spectrum that the general public finds acceptable is known as the Overton window, and moderates like to stay inside it. In most situations, moderates are apolitical, which simply means that they don't care about politics, yet are somewhat informed about it. Populism. It emphasizes appealing to a broad audience and their sensibilities, with the idea that the general public must receive what they desire. It is a movement by the people for the people, so it can take many different forms. Because of this, it has no true political affiliation, but it is frequently associated with democracies because it depends on popular support, frequently divides the populace from the elite, and is frequently anti-politics and anti-establishment. Socialism. Although the term socialism has many different meanings, in its traditional definition, it refers to worker-owned means of production that strongly encourage worker coups. Democratic self-governance and democratic workplaces, modern socialism, promotes democratic self-management by workers, hefty taxes on the wealthy, and nationalization of important industries. Social ownership is one of socialism's core principles. Separatism. The goal of separatist, sometimes referred to as secessionism, is to create an independent nation-state or government apart from an already existing nation. Progressivism. Progressivism holds that historical legacies should not be revered and should instead be seen as secondary to society advancement. It is essentially the antithesis of conservatism, communitarianism. An ideology known as communitarianism places a strong emphasis on the community as the fundamental social unit. It also typically emphasizes the idea that politics' left-right binary is holding the political system back and argues that policies from both parties are beneficial to the community and necessary. Finally, it holds that absolute individualism is harmful when it stands in the way of the common good. Subscribe to watch the similar videos I'll be making.
Projecting, manipulating scapegoats in often subtle, hard-to-detect ways. Often, the manipulator will project their own thinking onto the victim, making the victim look like they have done something wrong. Manipulators will also claim that the victim is the one who is at fault for believing lies that they were conned into believing, as if the victim forced the manipulator to be deceitful. All blame, except for the part that is used by the manipulator to accept false guilt, is done in order to make the victim feel guilty about making healthy choices, correct thinking, and good behaviors. It is frequently used as a means of psychological and emotional manipulation and control. Manipulators lie about lying, only to remanipulate the original, less believable story into a more acceptable truth that the victim will believe. Projecting lies as being the truth is another common method of control and manipulation. Manipulators may falsely accuse the victim of deserving to be treated that way. They often claim that the victim is crazy or abusive, especially when there is evidence against the manipulator. Bandwagon effect. Manipulator comforts the victim into submission by claiming, whether true or false, that many people already have done something, and the victim should as well. Such manipulation can be seen in peer pressure situations, often occurring in scenarios where the manipulator attempts to influence the victim into trying drugs or other substances. Brandishing anger. Manipulator uses anger to brandish sufficient emotional intensity and rage to shock the victim into submission. The manipulator is not actually angry, they just put on an act. They just want what they want and get angry when denied. Controlled anger is often used as a manipulation tactic to avoid confrontation, avoid telling the truth, or to further hide intent. There are often threats used by the manipulator of going to the police, or falsely reporting abuses that the manipulator intentionally contrived to scare or intimidate the victim into submission. Blackmail and other threats of exposure are other forms of controlled anger and manipulation, especially when the victim refuses initial requests or suggestions by the manipulator. Anger is also used as a defense, so the manipulator can avoid telling truths at inconvenient times or circumstances. Anger is often used as a tool or defense to ward off inquiries or suspicion. The victim becomes more focused on the anger instead of the manipulation tactic. Feigning confusion. Manipulator tries to play dumb by pretending they do not know what the victim is talking about or is confused about an important issue brought to their attention. The manipulator intentionally confuses the victim in order for the victim to doubt their own accuracy of perception, often pointing out key elements that the manipulator intentionally included in case there is room for doubt. Sometimes manipulators will have used cohorts in advance to help back up their story. Feigning innocence. Manipulator tries to suggest that any harm done was unintentional or that they did not do something that they were accused of. Manipulator may put on a look of surprise or indignation. This tactic makes the victim question their own judgment and possibly their own sanity. Seduction. Manipulator uses charm, praise, flattery, or overtly supporting others in order to get them to lower their defenses and give their trust and loyalty to the manipulator. They will also offer help with the intent to gain trust and access to an unsuspecting victim they have charmed. Playing the victim. Manipulator portrays themselves as a victim of circumstance or of someone else's behavior in order to gain pity, sympathy, or evoke compassion and thereby get something from another. Caring and conscientious people often cannot stand to see anyone suffering, and the manipulator often finds it easy to play on sympathy to get cooperation. Shaming. Manipulator uses sarcasm and put-downs to increase fear and self-doubt in the victim. Manipulators use this tactic to make others feel unworthy and therefore defer to them. Manipulators can make one feel ashamed for even daring to challenge them. It is an effective way to foster a sense of inadequacy in the victim. Love bombing. In order to trick their victim into thinking they are loved, the manipulator uses love bombing, which is a deceptive tactic in which they lavish their victim with attention, praise, and extravagant talks about future plans. The manipulator expresses strong emotions to make the victim feel like the most important person in their abuser's life. But in reality, the abuser uses this technique to quickly acquire as much power and control as possible. In addition, those who use love bombing to manipulate will get the victim very attached to the praise and then take it away at any time, making the victim crave it. Lying, by commission. It is hard to tell if somebody is lying at the time they do it, although often the truth may be apparent later when it is too late. One way to minimize the chances of being lied to is to understand that some personality types, particularly psychopaths, are experts at lying and cheating, doing it frequently, and often in subtle ways. Guilt trip, a special kind of intimidation tactic. A manipulator suggests to the conscientious victim that they do not care enough, are too selfish, or have it too easy. This can result in the victim feeling bad, keeping them in a self-doubting, anxious, and submissive position. Smear campaigns. Smear campaigns are not typically used by one person against another. Rather, politicians and celebrities regularly charge the public and media with damaging their reputations in order to achieve financial gain and publicity by taking part in smear campaigns against them. The goal of smear campaigns is to portray the victim as unreliable and untrustworthy by disseminating rumors and gossip about them. Character assassination is a common component of smear campaigns when targets are deliberately misrepresented and their intended meanings are twisted to suit a certain objective. Because any attack against the victim can be readily justified if they appear immoral or unethical. Michael Jackson is a well-known figure who has publicly criticized the media for portraying him as a child molester, leading many individuals to viciously accuse him, believing that any action taken against him was just and proper. Regardless of your personal opinion of either of them, Donald Trump, a politician and celebrity, spent the majority of his 2016 U.S. presidential campaign criticizing the media and their attacks on them. Their wars against the press are two purported instances of smear campaigns against a single person. Threats or coercion. There are numerous ways that threats might manifest. First, there is the clear physical threat of harm or destruction of property if the victim deviates from the manipulator's wishes. Next are emotional threats, such as threatening to end a relationship over a minor disagreement or spreading unfavorable rumors about someone that could harm their reputation. Financial threats are when someone threatens their financial stability or withholds support. And hackers love to use these situations against businesses when they successfully carry out a data breach. Colonial Pipeline, a significant petroleum pipeline operator in the United States, was recently the target of one of these attacks. For the decryption, hackers sought payment in Bitcoin, totaling $4.4 million. Important financial threats can also quickly escalate into legal threats when one party threatens to sue another. Lastly, there are social threats, where a manipulator uses lies and smear campaigns to harm the victim's reputation. Aggressive jokes. Jokes can frequently be used to manipulate a victim in a number of ways, with far deeper meanings and intents. In their piece for Thought Catalog, author Shahida Arabi addresses this and quotes someone who claims that secret narcissists take pleasure in making hurtful comments about you. These are usually dressed up as just jokes so that they can get away with saying appalling things while still maintaining an innocent, cool demeanor. Yet anytime you are outraged at an insensitive, harsh remark, you are accused of having no sense of humor. These jokes go far past the line, taking insults, sarcasm, gaslighting, and exclusionary jokes to a wildly different level. Then there are jokes that take place at social events that are designed to isolate the person on the receiving end of them, turning them into the perceived fool and causing everyone around them to become an aggressor. Pedro Lopez, child murderer and rapist, known as the Monster of the Andes. Lopez targeted young girls between the ages of 8 and 12, arrested in 1980 and convicted in 1983 of killing 3 young girls, but claimed to have killed hundreds. Despite being believed to be one of the most prolific serial killers of the 20th century, he was released in the late 1990s. Javed Iqbal, child murderer and rapist known as Kukri, Iqbal murdered 100 street children by strangling them and covering up his crimes by dissolving the bodies with acid. He was arrested in December 1999 after sending a letter to a newspaper and was set to be executed in the manner described by the judge, who stated, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed, and your body will then be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." However, he died in custody before he could be executed. Mikhail Popkov, serial rapist killer nicknamed the Werewolf, who was active for 2 decades in Angarsk, Irkutsk, and Vladivostok. After being convicted of 22 murders in 2015, he confessed to an additional 59 murders, of which he was convicted of 56 in 2018. In July 2020, Popkov confessed to more killings, bringing the total number of admitted victims to 83. He was sentenced to life. Daniel Camargo Barbosa, child and woman murderer, believed to have possibly raped and killed over 150 victims, primarily targeting female children as they were more likely to be virgins, confessed to killing 72 victims. He strangled young girls in Colombia and was arrested, but he escaped from prison and started killing in Ecuador. He was rearrested in 1986 and was allegedly incarcerated in the same Ecuadorian prison as 300-plus serial killer Pedro Lopez. Camargo was killed in jail by the nephew of one of his victims, Pedro Rodrigues Filho. Rodrigues Filho claimed to have killed over 100 victims, 47 of them inmates. He also killed his father, who had killed his mother, and ate a piece of his heart. He killed his first 2 victims at the age of 14. He was first arrested in 1973. He was convicted and sentenced to 128 years, but the maximum one can serve in Brazil is 30 years. He was released in 2018. He was murdered by 2 men in 2023. Kampatimar Shankaria. Shankaria was an Indian serial killer who used a hammer to kill over 70 men and women between 1978 and 1979. He was hanged in 1979. His last words were, "I have murdered in vain," he declared. "Nobody should become like me." Hoshang Amini, known as the Ghost of the Connaught Wells, murdered 67 people in the city of Varriman from 1954 to 1962, sometimes aided by accomplices. He earned his nickname by decapitating his victims post-mortem and then dumping their bodies into wells. Yang Xinhai, known as the Monster Killer. Yang would enter victims' homes at night and kill using axes, meat cleavers, hammers, and shovels. He was executed by gunshot in 2004. Abul Jabbar, killed 65 men and boys by strangling them with turbans while raping them. Suspected of over 300 murders. Sentenced to death and hanged on October 21, 1970. Samuel Little. Little was convicted of killing 3 women, but later investigations linked 31 other murders to him. He is now thought to be America's most prolific serial killer. He claimed he killed as many as 93 victims total, 3 above his initial confession of 90. The FBI later confirmed a total of 60 murders linked to Little. The investigations into his crimes are ongoing. William Unek. Unek was a police constable who murdered 21 people with an axe in less than 2 hours before fleeing. 3 years later, Unek, armed with rifle and axe, murdered 36 more people in the village of Malampaka before being mortally wounded by police with a smoke bomb that caught fire. Mohammed Bija. Bija raped and killed at least 54 male children and teenagers. On November 27, 2004, he was sentenced to be executed. Bija said that if he was not arrested, he would kill 100 children. He was executed after being lashed in front of a crowd in 2005. Andrei Chikatilo. Known as the Butcher of Rostov, the Red Ripper, or the Rostov Ripper, Chikatilo was convicted of the murder of 53 women and children between 1978 and 1990. One man was previously convicted and executed for his first murder. Chikatilo was executed by gunshot in 1994. Anatoly Onoprienko, known as the Beast of Ukraine, the Terminator, and Citizen O. Onoprienko was convicted of the murders of 9 people in 1989 and 43 people in 1995. 1996. He traveled throughout Europe illegally from 1990 to 1995. Whether he killed during this time is unknown. He was sentenced to death and was later commuted to imprisonment for life. He died from heart failure in 2013. Floresvaldo de Oliveira, known as Cabo Bruno. De Oliveira was a former police officer and vigilante who murdered criminals in the outskirts of São Paulo. He was murdered by unknown assailants in 2012. Gary Ridgway. Ridgway was a truck painter who confessed to killing 71 women. He was also known as the Green River Killer. He almost exclusively targeted sex workers from Seattle. Ridgway was suspected of killing over 90 victims. He confessed to 71 and was convicted of 49. He was sentenced to life without parole. Alexander Pichushkin. Pichushkin was also known as the Chessboard Killer. He was convicted of murdering 49 victims and suspected of killing 60. He claimed to have murdered 62 people because he did not know that 2 of his victims had survived. He stated that his goal was becoming Russia's most prolific serial killer. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. John Wayne Gacy. Gacy is known to have murdered a minimum of 33 teenage boys and young men between 1972 and 1978, 26 of whom he buried in the crawl space of his Chicago home. He was known as the Killer Clown due to the fact he often entertained children at social events dressed in a self-devised clown costume. Executed by lethal injection in 1994. Ted Bundy. Bundy was an American serial killer known for his charisma and good looks. He officially confessed to 30 homicides, but had confessed to killing 36 women in the past, and some estimates run upwards of 100 or more. He was infamous for escaping from prison twice and murdering multiple victims in one day, sometimes abducting women from the same location within hours of one another. He was executed by electric chair in 1989. Vera Renci, Romanian serial killer nicknamed the Black Widow. Renci was convicted of killing 35 men through arsenic poisoning, but confessed to only killing 32 victims. Renci is one of the world's most prolific female serial killers. However, there is very little information about Renci and her crimes because personal information, criminal history, academic records, etc., were not cataloged as well as they are today, making some criminologists believe she was a figure of Romanian folklore rather than an actual person. Fernando Hernandez Leiva. Hernandez Leiva confessed to 100 murders and 6 kidnappings at the time of his arrest in 1999. He had been arrested previously in 1982 and 1986, the second time for murder, but escaped from prison, but later retracted and claimed that he had been beaten by the police and his family threatened in order to force him to confess. He was accused of as many as 137 murders in 5 southern Mexican states, was convicted of 33 murders, and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He tried unsuccessfully to commit suicide in prison. If his claim of 100+ victims were true, then Leiva would be Mexico's most prolific documented serial killer. Ramadan Abdelrahim Mansour. Mansour was a gang leader known as Al Turbini, the express train. He had raped and tortured homeless children, mostly boys aged 10 to 14 years old, aboard the trains between Cairo, Alexandria, Kalyubia, and Beni Suef. The victims were usually thrown off the moving train when they were dead or in agony. Other times, they were thrown into the Nile or buried alive. Mansour was executed in 2010. Donald Henry Gaskins, known as the meanest man in America, Gaskins was convicted of 9 murders committed in South Carolina between 1973 and 1975. He was suspected of 31 murders. 2 victims had been murdered while Gaskins had been incarcerated, one while Gaskins had been on death row. Later claimed on death row that he had murdered between 100 and 110 victims, executed by electric chair in 1991. Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega, nicknamed El Mataviejas, the old lady killer, he raped and killed at least 16 elderly women, aged from 61 to 93 years old, in and around Santander, Cantabria. He went unrecognized for over a year because he moved his victims into their beds after they were killed. No autopsies were made, and the deaths were attributed to natural causes. He also took trophies from his victims that he held in a particular room of his home. About 10% of these trophies remained unclaimed, implying the existence of other victims. He was stabbed to death by 2 inmates while incarcerated in 2002. Larry Eiler, known as the Interstate Killer, sentenced to death for the 1984 murder and dismemberment of 15-year-old Daniel Bridges. He confessed to other homicides of young men and boys in 5 separate states. Died of AIDS complications in 1994. Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer ate some of his victims and kept their body parts in his freezer. Was sentenced to life imprisonment, murdered in prison in 1994.